Welcome to the Sedgwick County Commission meeting. I'm Jill Tinsley. It's a beautiful day today to get out to the Sedgwick County Zoo, where they're offering Winter Wednesdays where admission's only $2.50 a person. Also, be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can find out more at sedgwickcounty.org. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Morning.
You have many important items on the agenda today, including a quarterly INTRUST Bank Arena report. And also, you'll hear from our appraiser today about the annual report of real property value trends. So with that, I'll let you get the meeting started, Chairman.
Well, thank you so much. It's a beautiful day outside. Thank you for being part of our meeting today, and for watching on TV, and for being in our audience today. Thank you for all of that. We have a lot on the agenda, so I guess we'll get right to it. Madam Clerk, let's go ahead and, let me go ahead and call the meeting to order, the Board of County Commissioner meeting for the date of February the 17th, 2016. Madam Clerk, first item, please.
Invocation to be led by Pastor Tim Little, Unity Church of Wichita. Please remain standing for the flag salute.
Good morning. Good morning. Let us pray. God, we turn to you knowing you are the source of life and the source of all wisdom and compassion. And so we pray and open ourselves to this compassion, knowing your desire is for a world that works for everyone, a world where all are respected and all are treated with dignity and respect, where all are seen as the image and likeness of God, where all are provided for, and cared about. We open ourselves to that spirit of compassion and wisdom which is yours. We open ourselves to know that we are guided in our decisions today, that these commissioners and all who are participating today are divinely guided and directed to do the right thing for all of us. We give thanks for this beautiful day. We give thanks for the blessings in our lives, and we give thanks for your presence that never leaves us or forsakes us. And for this we give you thanks, and so it is. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor Little, am I saying your name right?
Lytle.
Lytle. Well, Pastor Lytle, thank you for that really nice prayer. Really very encouraging to me. Thank you so much for doing that today. All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner Unruh.
Present.
Commissioner Norton. Commissioner Peter John.
Present.
Commissioner Ransaw.
Present.
Chairman Howell.
Present. All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Appointments. Item A, resolution appointing JAMA Mitchell to the Sedgwick County Community Corrections Advisory Board in an at-large position.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Yost, County Councilor. This item A is the appointment of JAMA Mitchell to the Community Corrections Advisory Board. She is an at-large appointment. Paperwork is in order, and I would urge adoption of the resolution.
Very good. What's the will of the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we appoint JAMA Mitchell to the Sedgwick County Community Corrections Advisory Board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Seeing no discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Peter John.
Aye.
Commissioner Ransaw.
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. All right. Next item, please.
Oh, no. She's here.
Oh, I'm sorry. She is here. Excuse me. I apologize.
Say the oath. We're going to say I do or I swear. Okay. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Kansas, faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Sedgwick County Community Corrections Advisory Board. So help me God.
I do.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I just want to say a quick thank you to my appointment. I do appreciate being considered. I appreciate the opportunity of being part of Community Corrections Advisory Board. I think they play an important role in guiding people out of the criminal justice systems and into better and brighter lives, and so I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Congratulations. Thank you for stepping up to this position. Really appreciate your service. All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item B, resolution appointing Grace KNEIL to the Sedgwick County Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Board.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Yost, County Councilor. This is a resolution appointing Grace KNEIL to the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Board. She is Commissioner UNRUH'S appointment. Paperwork appears to be in order. I would urge adoption of the resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the resolution.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. See no discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh,
Aye.
Commissioner Peter John,
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau,
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye.
Ms. Neal is here.
She is here. Great. Ms. Neal?
And I do the same thing. So you raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Kansas, and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Sedgwick County Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Board. So help me God.
I do.
Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Stay right here.
I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to serve this population. They've been part of my whole life, and I'm glad to extend it to the county. Thank you.
Well, Ms. Neal, thank you so much for being here today and for stepping up to serve us. I really appreciate your willingness to do so. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item C, resolution appointing Cindy Weber to the Sedgwick County Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Board.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Yost, County Councilor. This is a resolution appointing Cindy Weber to the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Board. She is also Commissioner UNRUH'S appointment. Paperwork appears to be in order, and I would urge adoption of the resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the resolution.
Second. A motion and a second. See no discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh,
Aye.
Commissioner Peter John,
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau,
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. And is Ms. Weber here today? She's not. Okay. We'll catch up with her later. All right, that motion passed. That's great. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
New business, item D, public hearing for the proposed adoption of the International Building Code 2012 edition.
Morning, Chairman and Commission. Tom Stolz, Director of the Metropolitan Area Building and Construction Department. Here today to discuss the adoption of the new Commercial Building Code for Wichita-Sedgwick County jurisdiction. As you recall, I appeared in front of you at the January 20th Board of County Commission meeting to announce today's public meeting regarding the adoption of the 2012 International Building Code, along with local amendments. During that meeting, I summarized Sedgwick County's philosophy of adopting contemporary building codes to help ensure the safety and welfare of our citizens, to provide consistent and sensible regulation rules for building community, and to help commercial building and residential insurance rates in Wichita-Sedgwick County remain at their lowest possible rates. The Wichita-Sedgwick County jurisdiction is currently operating under the 2006 Commercial Building Code. For discussion today is the proposed adoption of the 2012 International Building Code along with 71 amendments. The proposed amendments to the code are what are chronologically listed in today's resolution. Over the past 12 to 18 months, staff has reviewed the proposed new code and amendments with architects, builders, and developers who work in Sedgwick County. Additionally, we recently held 4 public meetings to allow for review and final vetting of the new code with amendments. From those efforts came the proposed amendment language in front of us today. Additionally, the recommended code was taken before the Wichita-Sedgwick County Building Codes and Standards Advisory Board for review. This duly appointed advisory board supported the proposed code adoption with amendments in an 8-0 vote at their January meeting. The vast majority of the amendments supplementing the National Building Code being presented today are carryovers from previous code cycles. These amendments address the following 4 areas. They give relief from regulation of the national code that do not make sense for this jurisdiction. They cover adoption of local trade codes, such as the Uniform Plumbing Code or the National Electric Code that we adopt locally. They reference ADA standards, which are enforced in the state of Kansas. And finally, they connect to local fire code related to matters directly involving the state of Kansas Fire Marshal's Office, the Wichita Fire Department, and Sedgwick County Fire District 1. During our discussion at public meetings, there were a handful of amendments that dominated the discussion time. I would like to briefly touch upon these 3 amendments. The most discussed change in the 2012 code dealt with what is now Section 32 of the resolution we are reviewing today. In short, this portion of the 2012 National Code calls for a sprinkler system to be installed in all new construction of buildings that have assembly usages for food and drink consumption when the fire area exceeds 5,000 square feet, or when the occupancy level rises above 100 people. Historically, the City of Wichita Code Department had allowed for an exception to this code, which allowed an occupancy of 300 people instead of 100. When the code departments merged in 2013, this exception was carried over to the Unified Code. The new amendment today continues to allow 300 occupancy numbers, but requires the builder to add a third exit or a fire alarm system to the building. Thus, the new amendment proposed today is still less restrictive than the 2012 code, but more restrictive than the previous amendment. This proposal was seen as a compromise between fire officials along with local builders and developers. Similarly, sections 27 and 35 of today's amendments that were developed in partnership between builders and Wichita Fire Code officials. Both of these amendments address large-scale storage facilities, most notably pertaining to aircraft hangars. The 2012 code calls for a sprinkler or fire suppression system when the building reaches 12,000 square feet in size. Historically, the City of Wichita Code Department allowed an exception for this for aircraft storage buildings to reach 26,000 square feet before requiring the sprinkler system. When the code departments merged in 2013, this exception was carried over to the Unified Code. The new amendment today is a compromise between the old amendment and the new code, which would allow storage areas of this nature to be built at 18,000 square feet before a sprinkler system is required. After recent consultation with officials from Sedgwick County Fire District Number 1, these current amendments will have to be specific to City of Wichita jurisdiction only. County jurisdiction will continue to follow the adopted 2012 building code and its standard. And finally, an email note was sent from a Sedgwick County constituent to at least 2 commissioners yesterday concerning 3 questions regarding Section 10 in today's National Building Code package. Overall, Section 10 pertains to the question of when a building permit is required in Sedgwick County, and it lists a number of exemptions when a permit is not required. In the 2012 code, a building permit is required for any structure over 120 square feet in size. This is a carryover from old code. Both Sedgwick County and Wichita Code Departments have historically not required a building permit until the structure reaches 200 square feet in size. This amendment to the National Code is carried forward in this adoption. A second issue brought up in that email dealt with location permits required for structures under 200 square feet. This type of permit is only required in the City of Wichita jurisdiction, so item number 1A under Section 10 today needs to more clearly state this, and we'll make it happen after the meeting. And finally, a third point brought up by the constituent pertains to Section 10, carrying forward an amendment requiring structures under 400 square feet which are not on foundation or slab to be anchored into the soil. This amendment portion is carried forward to prevent structures from blowing into neighbors' properties or structures. The constituent felt that this standard was too restrictive. At this point, I will conclude my presentation, and I would like to stand for questions specific to today's adoption. With me today are Bud Lett, who's the Assistant Director of MABCD, and some members of the Sedgwick County Fire Marshal's Office. And they will help me answer any technical questions that you may have. If there are no questions, or after questions are answered, I would request the Commission allow us until the March 16th Board of County Commission meeting to adjust Section 10, which I mentioned before, and any other adjustment brought forth by the majority of the Commission today. So with that, we're ready for questions.
Well, thank you for your presentation, Commissioner Ranzau.
Yeah, Tom, back to the aircraft hangar thing. Could you go over that again and clarify?
Let's go before the merger. Before 2013, the City of Wichita Code Department allowed an exemption to the code which called for fire sprinkler systems or suppression systems to be added into warehouses or aircraft hangars above 12,000 square feet. That's what the code called for. Wichita jurisdiction allowed that to go to 26,000 square feet.
What did we allow?
Sedgwick County has always adopted, or has been, whatever the code standard was, which was 12,000 square feet. When we merged, that amendment got carried over. It was not clear in the unified code that that was City of Wichita jurisdiction and only, and that's part of what we have to clean up in this adoption cycle. When we sat down a year ago and met with developers and the people who built those kinds of structures, they were adamant that 12,000 feet was unworkable for them and would begin to drive costs up. So there was a compromise between the fire marshal of Wichita and that group that they came to the 18,000 square foot mark. So the 2012 code that we're adopting says 12,000 square feet. The amendment that we're pushing forward today would allow 18,000 square feet. That's 1.5 times the fire space. But that can only be in the City of Wichita jurisdiction. Sedgwick County Fire Marshal, and I think I'll let him come forward, maybe explain that, but it's due to a water issue in the county, wants to keep that code at 12,000 square feet for fire suppression. Does that make sense, sir?
Yeah, that helps clarify. Thank you.
Commissioner Peter John?
That kind of segues very nicely into the point I was trying to make. So in effect, we've got two different codes here, one for the city, which we were really, it's documented here, but we're really talking about the county code and covering what's here for the county. They'll operate jointly, but we've got two separate and distinct codes, so there may be some confusion on the public side on this, and I'd appreciate some additional comments so that anyone who's watching this broadcast or reading the transcript will understand the separation that exists, even though we may have the same inspector inspecting, whether it's a aircraft warehouse or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Peter John. Both jurisdictions, Sedgwick County and City of Wichita, have the same code, and right now it's International Building Code. We're under 2006. We want to push to 2012. What changes is, and where you begin to see a divergence of application, is in the amendments that we're talking about, in the 71 amendments. Inside those amendments, some of them, not all of them, but some of them have specific requirements that are only for one jurisdiction or another, and we try to articulate that in the amendments. So when people go online or when people access the code books, it's important that they not only look at the code, but they look at the amendments of things which are specific to this jurisdiction. And there are reasons, valid and bona fide reasons, why some code applies only to unincorporated county and some code applies to City of Wichita. Location permit is a great example where we've diverged what is happening in the City of Wichita versus what happens in unincorporated county. Location permits are required in the city because inside of city limits and inside of an urban area, there are sewer lines, water lines, electric lines, all kinds of lines buried under the ground. And it's important that when people construct small utility sheds or outbuildings that they don't go over those lines, because someday those lines will have to be worked on and then their shed is over the line and it causes a problem. That problem doesn't necessarily exist in a county. So we've exempted that away from Sedgwick County unincorporated and Class 2 and 3 cities and kept it required only in City of Wichita. So there are bona fide reasons sometimes where we diverge that. It doesn't happen often, but a handful, 6, 10, 12 amendments inside of this adoption will be specific to one jurisdiction or another, and that's easily managed.
Okay. I'd like to jump back to the point that Commissioner Ranzow brought forward, and if the fire marshal needs to come up and give us more information, I'd like to understand why we would have a tighter restriction in the county than the city does from a water point of view if it comes to a fire situation, and why 12,000 square feet is kind of the optimal cutoff point.
I'll let him handle that.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dan Wagner, Fire Marshal of Sedgwick County Fire District Number 1. The county has kept the 12,000 square foot requirement for sprinkler systems. We've had that since 2003 when we adopted the code. When you get in the more rural areas of Sedgwick County, we have less water available, and we have a lot of small private airfields and airports with these single hangars. When we start getting into larger structures, we don't have the water supply for suppression to take care of those, and it's not there to incorporate a sprinkler system. So that limits on how big these buildings can be and the amount of storage that goes in these buildings.
The question I was concerned about was the fact that a lot of the aircraft hangars in this community are not inside the Wichita city limits, but they're more or less inside the city. If I look at the facilities down by where Boeing used to be, where Spirit is today. If I look at the Cessna facilities, my understanding is that they're technically not inside the city limits, so they would be covered by this. Am I wrong in that assumption?
Most of the aircraft hangars and facilities are within Sedgwick County. There are a few that are within the city limits of Wichita. Those current facilities already have the hangars sprinklered in our code compliant.
Well, the question I'd have is if the 12,000 square feet is the optimal that came down from the national code, I'd like to make it specific here and not put people who locate in the county at a comparative disadvantage compared to in the city of Wichita. Most of the aircraft facilities I'm aware of have water resources. They have the type of hydrants that would not put you in a situation that if you're, let's say, out in far western Sedgwick County and 10 miles away from the nearest hydrant, where you'd have that water problem, Chief.
Right.
And so my point would be I'm wondering if we might want to have an exception on this if they've got water availability in the county and they've got hydrant facilities so that they could support that. We wouldn't have an unnecessarily restrictive or tighter limitation on that and put folks out at the county at a comparative disadvantage compared to folks who are in the city just by regulation. And I'm not talking about just a little airfield where you've got a grass strip. I'm talking about some of the major employers here. I emphasize that in light of the fact that there was some very disquieting news this morning of one of the major corporate jet manufacturers, parent company in this town, announcing a very significant, sizable cutback in their workforce. And anything we can do to improve the regulatory climate is a priority for me. So I really want to understand why we've got this tighter restriction in the county, Chief.
Well, it's not that we're actually a tighter restriction. We've just stayed compliant with the code. The city of Wichita, with their codes, have made their codes less restrictive. In fact, they'd actually had taken those codes out of their code requirements and are bringing them back into existence. So we've maintained compliance with the code since 2003. My experience at this point, it really hasn't been a detriment to aircraft companies installing more facilities or having hangar access or meeting code compliance. They also fall under their insurance carriers for suppression and other factors. So when we go into look at a plan for a new hangar or facility in these aircraft, they're going to overbuild already. So they're going to stay within compliance of these codes. So we really haven't created a hardship for anybody at this point.
Well, we've got a significant distinction, and I'd rather be competitive with the city of Wichita than with some national code that really doesn't understand the nuances and the importance of the aviation industry within this county, although I defer to some of my colleagues up here if they've got more information because they may have more experience working in the aircraft industry than I possess, but that's a concern for me with this. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Unruh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just really looking for a comment from Tom here. So, Chief, thank you. But
thanks, sir.
My question is, or what I've been led to believe, is that these modifications are agreed upon by MABCD staff, by the fire district, and by the contractors who were also involved in this process. Is that correct?
The fire marshals sat down with the developers and talked about this 26,000 down to 12,000 change. And through that discussion, the developers were satisfied with 18,000 square feet. When we wrote the resolutions up, I was thinking we were going to have that universally across the board. But upon talking to the fire marshal just within the last few days and understanding better their water restriction issues in the county, they would go back to code compliant. So that piece of the discussion, I think between now and adoption time, we need to have with the developers and make that known. I do agree with the marshal that many times people that are building these kinds of buildings today automatically put water systems in. It's better for insurance rates and other issues, but it could come up. It could be an issue in the future if someone does not. Now you have two jurisdictional issues. So this piece of this amendment, I think it would behoove me to go back to the developers and talk about the change that's happened just in the last week or so. Okay. So, but you're correct. We sat down and negotiated all this, talked all the way through this, and came to this 18,000 square foot resolution.
Okay, and so if they have significant objection to going back to the code as it is, then we just have to make a decision.
I think I need to offer the commission two choices on what they want to do, what they want to vote for.
Well, thanks for that clarification. That's all I had.
Mr. Stoltz, just to follow up on that, how many of these buildings in Sedgwick County are kind of between the 12,000 and 18,000 foot size? I'm not sure how many structures are of that size. I mean, it seems like a fairly small for an aircraft hangar that's a manufacturing facility. But
there's several. We have several dozen within the county jurisdiction of the 12 to 18,000 square foot size. Now, when you start talking 25 and 30 and 40,000 square feet, that's pretty limited. But there are several that this would impact.
So like the personal hangars that people might have for their own private plane, they're probably smaller than that.
Yes.
And the manufacturing sites are larger than that. So it seems like a strange window to try to hit that 12,000, 18,000 foot is kind of
I think the spirit of the code is that when structures get so large and they're holding flammable materials, airplanes and fuel and oil and all the things that go into that, if a fire starts in there, we look at what we can respond to in this jurisdiction from fire emergency standpoint. And when you start talking about 18 and 26 and 30,000 square feet buildings, we've done the math on it. Both marshals have done the math. And if that fire would start, we would have to spend half of our fire resources in this entire county to go combat that blaze. Now that leaves 50% of the county exposed during that time. So it's that kind of discussion where we begin to affix numbers and try to make sure that the spirit of the code is actually public safety oriented. So structures smaller than that can be fought more efficiently, and thus the requirement doesn't exist there. It's a debate of when you start kicking that restriction in and when you want fire suppression and sprinkler systems regulated into the building. That's the debate.
Have there been any incidents in Sedgwick County where one of these structures has been on fire, and that not any incident to speak of? That's.
I mean, I'd have to ask the marshal to come back and talk about that. Not in the 3 years since I've been in the code department, sir.
You know, just curiously, I've seen some of these private hangars that are many doors in one building, so they're very long and skinny buildings. Mm-hmm. Are each one of those considered a building independently, or is the entire structure? So there's 20 doors on the front of a building, for example. Is that all one building, or is that considered?
No, if it's simply a number of doors, that would be considered one building. Now what you'll see happen in some of these larger structures, that they'll put a fire separation wall in the middle of a building, and when you look at it from the outside, it looks like it's one warehouse. But they do a fire separation wall in the middle of the building, and now we consider it as two structures, basically, as far as code.
And I was involved in a building project one time not too long ago in the county, and we had a big discussion about sprinkler system being required. Mm-hmm. In fact, there was some logistic challenges on how to do that in an area where you didn't have water supply. I mean, I understand the firefighters also need water, but you just don't hook up to a municipal water supply to do the sprinkler system. You've got to have some other way to do that. Is that true? How do they get the water volume for a remote building?
I know the rural water district gives us challenges as far as water pressure. I'll let the marshal handle the first part of that question.
Well, a lot of the problem is on the rural water systems is we just don't have that volume of water. They're smaller mains and smaller lines. So out in the rural parts of Sedgwick County, we rely on shuttling water through our tender systems.
I guess my question is, if you were building a structure out there in the middle of nowhere, how do they provide the volume of water to adequately supply a sprinkler system inside that building?
They don't.
So if we make this a requirement and they can't comply with that because there's not a water supply,
then we look at other means of construction or limiting it to the square footage of the building so it's not sprinklered.
Okay, that to me is a key piece there, and so that concerns me. So what you're saying, if I understand correctly, then if you're out in a remote part of the county, you don't have access to rural water or municipal water,
right?
There will be no hangars larger than 12,000 square feet. That's essentially what we're saying.
Essentially what it is. We have had other buildings. We have 2 facilities out in Sedgwick County that have actually put in wells and pumps that were able to supply the water demands for their buildings and put a sprinkler system in. So we've worked with other alternative measures. We've used cisterns or storage water tanks to meet the water requirements for them. So when we have these type of projects come in there, we do what we can to help them meet the compliance of the code or find alternative methods so their project doesn't.
So that would require them to have electricity and pumps and things in place that would actually have to be operational to make that system work.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Ranzau?
Yeah, just to comment on your line of question there, the problems that I have, I keep, what happens is a lot of people don't do things out in the county because of this. I get complaints all the time about our fire district not working with people, and some of the rules and regulations are stopping economic development. And so when you say your points are right on, it just becomes economically not feasible. And so we have to be able to balance this stuff. And so I'm concerned about some of these regulations that we're putting on here. I'm really not interested in making things more restrictive. I'd prefer to have them less restrictive, and we need to find some solutions and work better with the people as we move forward. So that's all I have to say.
I'll just make a comment, and following up with that, if the intent of the sprinkler system, I think, is for human safety, to protect life, I assume.
Well, it's also to protect the property. You look at the impact of a fire on a business. The most recent one we had was at Air Products. That was a sprinkler system that activated, put the fire out. A month later, they're back up in production and stuff. So it had less of an economic and financial impact on the community and on that business. If that business had been burned to the ground, the impact on Sedgwick County and the people around there that depended on those jobs or the people that depended on those products would have been gone.
I understand that.
So it covers both. It's a life safety, but also the sprinkler systems put a level of protection in there that will protect the investments of that business and the people working there, so it's not out of business.
I understand that point. I guess I would just say, in the free market world, I would let them make the decisions on risk and investment.
Sure.
If we're talking about property, things are insured. They accept certain levels of risk for how they operate their businesses. They purchase insurance products, and they're willing to accept certain amounts of risk, understanding the decisions and the ramifications of those decisions. And so, for us to mandate a single solution to this, it limits their freedom a little bit. And I guess as long as we're not talking about human safety, to me this is more of an issue of property risk management. So I guess I'm less concerned about that. Of course, I don't want anybody to have their property damaged, of course. But having said that, I would like to give those business owners and those property owners rights to make decisions on their own. If it's not really about safety of human lives. So there's a lot of other codes in place in terms of exits and size of exits and all kinds of other things. Storage of hazardous, flammable liquids and things like that are, I'm sure, in place as well. So a lot of mitigations in place to create safety, and this is just one of many. Anyway, so I may actually probably not agree with the 12,000 foot size myself, but thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioners, we are going to have a hearing here. I don't see any other comments right at this time. We'd like to open this up to the public. We're going to open up a hearing and allow the public to speak to this. So do I need to make a motion to open this hearing? Just open it. I guess you just need to open it. So we're going to go ahead and open up the public hearing on the proposed adoption of the International Building Code for 2012 edition, and ask the public to come up and make comments.
Lonnie Wright, 1721 South Lulu, Wichita. I wasn't involved in this evaluation of the building code, but when we were dealing with our commercial fire sprinklers 6 and 9 years ago, we learned that it was mostly insurance company driven. That even if the local was more generous, the insurance companies wanted the national standard. And if you didn't meet that, then there's a balance of cost. So just from those years of experience, I think there is a basis for the 12,000 square feet to protect the investment. And those people that aren't able to build or something, I think maybe they need to talk with their insurance companies. But I imagine it would still continue today, and that we need to see what the insurance costs are by not following that. Thank you.
I have a comment or question for Commissioner Peter John.
Mr. Wright, do you think we should? Do you think the city of Wichita should change their standards so we'd be uniform and make them at 12,000 feet too?
No, I think there's different situations. As we've gone through this consolidation, in fact, it's almost a surprise how much that we can be uniform. But, you know, in Wichita, we've got the water. We've got the supply. I mean, if we were an insurance company wanting to insure, we could say, you know, they're going to get there in fewer minutes, and we balance it with the county. So I think in this case, while it's kind of a reversal, generally we're more generous in the county. I think the facts of the water supply and the insurance perspective calls for it to be different.
Well, even if they had the water supply, the hydrants out there, we'd have the tighter standard. Let me ask a question to the fire marshal, if I may. I appreciate your testimony, Mr. Wright.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
As questions come up in terms of how this may be insurance driven, my understanding that the insurance rates for insuring for property and casualty on buildings is mainly driven by the location of the fire stations, as opposed to what type of how close they are to the fire station, as opposed to whether they have hydrants nearby or not. Am I correct in that supposition, or is it more driven by water availability in terms of determining insurance rates? It's
driven by both. When you're talking about a municipality and its ability to supply water, that is factored in heavily. The ISO rating that we currently have in Sedgwick County gives communities that have a water distribution system of an ISO rating of 2, which actually gives a lot lower insurance premiums for industry, not so much on the residential, but it did help them out. Outside of the municipalities within 5 miles of a fire station, we have a water hall rating of a 4, which is actually rather good. So yeah, it is driven both by the fire service and the ability to deliver the water.
You happen to know off the top of your head what the ISO rating for the city of Wichita or city of Derby happen to be?
I believe they're 3s right now. I'm not 100%, but I believe that they've got a water rating of 3.
And that would cover the entire municipal, their entire municipal boundaries?
Yes, of Wichita.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any other member of the public like to speak to the commission on this topic today? Seeing none, this is a final call. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing considering the adoption of the International Building Code for 2012 edition. Any other comments or questions from commissioners right now? I have one more. Mr. Stoltz, you and I were speaking about this issue of window size. I can't seem to find that window size. I can't seem to find that in this backup material.
In the amendment package?
Yeah, I don't see it now. I'm looking for it. I don't know where it's at.
I'll find it. It's in there, sir, and I'll locate
and
it.
You and I talked also about there was some information you gave us a little earlier that talked about some things being less restrictive or the same. Mm-hmm. And I asked a question about, is that referenced to the 2012 code or reference to the 2006 code? And I never got an answer to that. So when you say something's less restrictive than the 12 code, it may still be more restrictive than the 6 code. Is there a way for us to understand that? Are you still planning on presenting that to us at some point?
There was, where I went through all of the 71 amendments again to try to determine comparing the 6 to the 12 and then where the amendment fit in. And there was a couple that I emailed that, and a couple of them I mentioned today, which were actually less restrictive than the 2012 code, but more restrictive than the amendment that we had previously had, and there was 3 of those. The rest of these are all carryovers, or there's no change or no difference. So the fire window, or the window access dimensions is under section 36, of the resolution.
What page that's on?
It's 19 on the copy I'm looking at here, but.
Is this one of the three areas that's more restrictive?
That is correct. That is a more restrictive requirement. The code itself only deals with the width and does not deal with the height. Both fire marshals wanted 48 inches of height brought in, which is more restrictive than code, to allow for full-size firefighters to get through with air packs on into the structure to fight the fire.
This is so in the 06 code. What was there was no height?
There was no height in any of the IBC. There never has been. This amendment is locally brought in here to bring the height factor in.
But there was a square footage.
That's correct.
Standard. What was that standard? Do you know? Sorry.
Stand by, sir.
Sorry, I put you on the spot here. Should have asked you my questions at a time. All right, so this is while they're looking up the information, this is a 48-inch requirement or 4-foot requirement for height.
Correct.
So if you have an 8-foot ceiling and the window presumably does not go clear to the ceiling, so it's, say, it goes to 7 feet, that means the window is going to go from 3 feet off the floor to 7 feet off the floor. It's a very tall window. That does change the aesthetics of the building. It also changes the efficiency, HVAC type efficiency of the building.
I wouldn't disagree with that,
cost
sir.
of the building. I mean,
Yes.
there's a lot of, I guess, concerns I have about that.
Okay.
We stamped right over it, but it's 762 millimeters.
The code language says openings shall have a minimum dimension of not less than 30 inches, and they break it down into metric 762 millimeters, and that's the standard in the code. So in the resolution, we have kept that standard and added the 48-inch height requirement, thus making it more restrictive.
Okay. I will be thinking about this one a little bit more as we go forward. I guess right now I'm not sure I agree with this right at this time, so I just need to think about this a little bit more. We're not going to adopt this today, so we're just going to be thinking about it.
Okay.
What was the third thing that you said there was 3 issues that were more restrictive? Can you mention the third one? So we talked about 2 of them.
Section 27, which was the 27 and 35, dealt with the aircraft hangar discussion that we just had. The 12,000, 18,000, 26,000 square feet discussion we just had. The old amendment was 26,000. The new amendment's 18,000. More restrictive than the old amendment, less restrictive than the code. And the third issue is this window height issue that we're discussing here today.
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, that's all my questions so far. See no other questions or comments from the commissioners. We need to go ahead and I guess we're going to defer action at this time until a later date. You mentioned March the 16th is a good date for us to get back together.
That's correct, sir. My plan is to go to City Council on March 15th for their first read and come back to you guys on March 16th.
Okay. Counselor, would it be okay for us to just defer this action until that time?
That's fine.
Okay. Well, I guess, yes, sir?
Close the public hearing.
We already closed the public hearing. We did that already. So we're ready now to defer action on the proposed resolution until a future meeting, which would be March the 16th, 2016, if that's okay. So I think with that, I'll go ahead and make a motion. We would go ahead and defer action on the proposed resolution until March the 16th of 2016.
Thank you, sir.
We'll deal with it at that time.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh,
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn,
Aye.
Commissioner Ransaw,
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item E, Quarterly Interest Bank Arena Report.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Holt, Assistant County Manager. You have a copy of the presentation at your places. It looks like the computer is deciding to be a little slow in opening up. So we're not going to wait for that. We're going to continue. We're going to continue with the report. You have a copy of the report at your places. This is the fourth quarter 2015 INTRUST Bank Arena report, and it also, as a fourth quarter, then gives us a year-to-date 2015 year-to-date report, and we'll look at year-over-year 2015-2014. As We state each of these meetings the goal for the INTRUST Bank Arena was to develop and build a modern first-class sports and entertainment venue in downtown Wichita that seats 15,000 for basketball. This facility is owned by Sedgwick County, and it's operated by SMG. The original management agreement between the county and SMG was August 1, 2007. The plan for the arena, it was developed in 2004. It was a centerpiece of the Arena Neighborhood Redevelopment Plan that was adopted in November of 2007. The financing for the arena was a 30-month voter-approved, 30-month 1% sales tax. Collections July 2005 through December 2007 totaled $206.5 million. The total project cost for the arena project, buying the property, demolishing buildings, construction cost, all of the work related to the project was $191 million. As a result of that, as we had planned, we ended up with an operating and maintenance reserve fund. And that fund, based on the collections and the cost, was $15.5 million. The construction date was, start date was November 19, 2007. Groundbreaking was December 4, 2007. The arena opened January 9, 2010. Each of these reports on a quarterly basis, we talk about the aspects, both the ticket sales and the financial aspects of the SMG agreement. We talk about or share with you the arena event parking. We have an agreement with the City of Wichita about managing that parking. And we talk about the arena sales tax reserves and any upcoming events. So I'm going to move to slide in your packet, slide 7, and get right into the quarterly report. So the fourth quarter 2015 ticket sales, if you look at slides 7, 8, 9, and 10, all of those are events that happened during the fourth quarter. We ended up with 29 events, 35 performances, for attendance numbers of 177,574 in the fourth quarter. Tickets sold 176,115. Gross ticket sales of $8,197,666. The average cost per ticket sold during the fourth quarter of 2015 was $46.55. The average attendance per performance was 6,123. Year-to-date 2015, we had 101 events, 131 performances. Attendance was 439,767. That does not include non-ticketed events, Wingapalooza, Winter Jam, or the Living Proof Live events. Tickets sold 415,688. Gross ticket sales 15,807,233, an average cost per ticket of $38.03, and the average attendance per performance was 4,487. Looking at the year to date, 2015 versus the year-to-date 2014 ticket sales, again 131 performances in 15 compared to 116 performances in 16, which was 140,000 more performances. 15 than 140,942 more performances in 15 and 14. 138,951 more tickets sold in 15 than 14. Gross ticket sales in 15 were more than gross ticket sales in 14 by $7,845,791, and the average ticket price 15 over 14 was $9.26. Moving on, we look at on slide 13 the fourth quarter community affairs reports. The net employee wages and benefits in the fourth quarter was $803,472. Full-time employees was 42 to 43 over those 3 months. Part-time employees over the 3 months range from 351 to 366. If you look at year-to-date, 2015, community, what we call community affairs, the net employee wages and benefits was $2,831,503. The employment full-time ranged from 37 to 43 over the year, and part-time employees range from 326 to 374 over the year. On slide 15, looking at the year-over-year, 15 to 14, we had 307,871 more paid in net employee wages and benefits, 15 compared to 14, and we had 1 to 2 difference in full-time employees and 14 to 22 difference less in part-time employees, 14 to 15. Fourth quarter 2015, total number of community groups that were volunteering in concession stands. Again, some of these groups repeated. 72. Amount paid to these groups for the fourth quarter was $173,749. Spending with Sedgwick County or Kansas companies amounted to $1,157,129.23. Sales tax paid for the fourth quarter was $857,902.23. There were 7 arena presentations or arena tours during the fourth quarter and 6 local events or activities in the fourth quarter. Looking at those numbers year to date, we had a total of 244 community groups. Again, some of those were repeat. Those are not separate individual groups. Amounts paid to those groups for the year was $428,460. Spending with Sedgwick County or Kansas companies for the year was $3,657,777.52. Sales tax paid for the year 2015 by the arena, $1,664,443.06. Arena presentations or tours, 33. Local events or activities, 32. Comparing year over year, we had 40 more community group opportunities for participation and volunteering in concession stands. Paid those groups $122,883 more in 15 than 14. Spending with Kansas companies increased by $1,081,988.38, 15 over 14. Sales tax increased by $806,146.01, 15 over 16. We had arena presentations. There were 15 additional ones, 15 to 14, and 7 less local events or activities. The next number of slides, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, all relate to community activities that the arena staff and or donations that were made during the fourth quarter. Moving on then into the financial summary, I'm on slide 28. You'll see there that we had a total, these numbers include other in the performances and events, so they are a little bit different from the earlier numbers because of that. We had in the fourth quarter, number of performances during the fourth quarter, 35. Number of events, 39. Net event income for the fourth quarter was $2,193,310. Total operating or other operating income was $483,646 for a total gross building income of $2,676,956. The building operating expenses for the fourth quarter was $1,620,711. Net building income, $1,056,245. That's an important number for you to focus on, because when we get to the year-to-date number, this number will be loom large in the final results for 2015. Year-to-date 2015 then, total performances 131, number of events 101, for net event income of $4,933,803. Other operating income $1,633,878, for the total gross building income of $6,567,681. The building operating expenses for the year, $5,417,475. The net building income then for 2015 was $1,150,206. You see the year over on slide 30. You see the year-over-year 15-14 differences in performances. There were 15 more in 15 than 14, one more event in 15 than 14, $1,964,080 more in net income, 15 over 16. Slide 31. There was $32,404 less other operating income, 15 over 14, but $1,931,676 more total gross building income, 15 over 14. Moving on to slide 32, you see the operating expenses were $904,323 less in 15 than 14. We see that the total net building income difference was $1,027,353 more in 15 than in 14. Moving on to the contract for parking that we have with the City of Wichita. In fourth quarter, the net income there was a positive $28,709.66. For the year, slide 35, was $44,812.19. Looking at slide 38, you have the arena sales tax reserves, the O&M reserve. As of December 31, 2015, it's $12,944,915.21. You see the revenues and expenditures for the fourth quarter on that slide as well. Year over year, the arena sales tax reserve fund was less by $592,500.61 end of 15 compared to the end of 14. Slides 40, 41, and 42 are listing of upcoming events, and it's a pretty robust and full first quarter into second quarter schedule for 2016. I failed to mention at the beginning of the report, A.J. Bileski, the general manager for the arena, is here this morning. That's the end of the report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for a good presentation. Appreciate the presentation. Presentation did a really good job, I guess, putting a lot of stuff together. So thank you for that. Commissioner Peter John.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an incredible report, and it's one that I've looked forward to reading about in terms of from a gross revenue side and the information on. I mean, it looks like 52% of the total revenue at the INTRUST Bank Arena occurred in the fourth quarter of 2015 by my very rough calculations while you were proceeding here, and that we had an increase of almost 100% in terms of ticket sales. I don't know how that compares with other facilities around the country. If Mr. Bileski would have any information on how that performance compared with other SMG facilities around the country or any other facilities, I'd certainly be interested in hearing how that came out, because I'm very impressed. Of course, expected a stellar return with in terms of how this report came in based on all of the 16 additional events and that huge series of Garth Brooks concerts that I think were 4 or 5 of those events. Mr. Bolesky?
Good morning, Commissioners. A.J. Bolesky, General Manager for INTRUST Bank Arena. Fourth quarter, we're somewhat cyclical in nature, our building. That's why when we compare quarter versus quarter, year over year, sometimes third quarter might be really bad. Sometimes it could be really good, depending on where events land. This year, typically first quarter is really strong for us. Fourth quarter is usually right behind it. And this year, we had some bigger events in the fourth quarter. Obviously, one you mentioned, Garth, was 6 shows. So that's basically like we had 6 different concerts, but all in one. So that's going to add a lot to it. We also had Def Leppard in the fourth quarter as well, along with Ariana Grande. Several major big concerts that kind of drove that, along with the 2 basketball games. So incredible fourth quarter. Our staff did a tremendous job all year and finished extremely strong. And we thank the community for supporting our events. Well, I'm thinking year over year. Isn't this is a good deal more total revenue than we took in even in the initial year that we opened the facility back in 2010. Is my recollection correct on that point? I'm not sure on the revenue side, but on the net operating income side, this is our second best year we've ever had, without having the numbers directly in front of me. And Ron may be able to speak to it, but yeah, second best year ever in the history. So. Are you presenting us with a check today?
The agreement calls for the check to be presented after the audit is done, and that's required to be done on or before April 1. So it's in the April time frame before we get the check.
Okay. Well,
the first year, I don't know what the gross numbers were in the first year, but the net numbers for year 1 was a little over $2 million. And so this year we're a little over $1 million.
Okay. Well,
the whole year, the first year was a strong year, and to be expected. A new facility, new opening. So it was a strong year the whole year that first year.
Okay, because I was interested in how we'd compare on these numbers, and one thing that was a little bit disquieting to me in terms of the numbers, Ron, you mentioned that we started out with a $15.5 million O&M reserve, and it looks like we're down to about $12.9 million. About 2.6 million less. And if I can fumble back here to your page on the report, looked like our O&M reserves dropped to 12.9 million, and this is a reduction of almost 600,000 from this time last year. Is that correct?
That's correct. And remember that our 2015 capital improvement numbers was $700,000.
Well,
so it's less. That number, that 592, is less than what the capital improvement numbers were, expenditures were in 2015.
Okay, because I'm continuing to be concerned if that O&M reserve continues to diminish. If it gets down to 0, then we're going to have to come up with an additional funding source to support this. And since this was such a remarkable, not only a quarter, but also for the year, if we ended up having an additional $600,000 reduction, that's troubling to me. I'd be very interested, obviously, in seeing what the final audited numbers look like, and hopefully they're going to be close to where they are right now. Since we have a different operating agreement than we had back in 2010 or 2013, I'd be very interested from a staff point of view, Ron, in terms of how these numbers would vary depending upon if we were operating under the old agreement versus the one that we have at the moment. And I just share that going forward between now and the audited report to give you a heads up going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Unruh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, I just want to say to AJ and all your team that it's a great year and we're really proud of you. It's a very good job, and I hope you extend those congratulations to the rest of your team. One statistic that I always like to look at, and that has to do with the community affairs slide that you have that shows we paid in 2015 $428,000 to community groups and $3.6 million spending with Sedgwick County companies. That's I'm sure they're appreciative of that. And taxes paid almost $1.7 million. So those are great numbers that show how this venue is affecting more than just the entertainment portion of it. So very good job. Appreciate it.
I agree with the comments from the two previous commissioners especially. I am concerned about the O&M reserves, but I also want to say thank you, AJ, for doing a great job. This has been an exciting year. It's been a lot of things to be very excited about in this community. And without the arena, we would have a lot less fun things to do here. So I'm really glad that it's there, and I'm glad it is, it's paid for by the sales tax that people voted for. It is standing on its own 2 feet. It's actually accomplishing all of its goals. In fact, I would like to point out on slide number 9, you actually had one event where your attendance was 15,004 attendees. That's 4 more than your goal, that's pretty awesome. I think that's the biggest number I've ever seen in terms of attendance. Is that a record at all?
I'm not looking. I think that's the WSU basketball game.
Yeah. Could you squeeze in any more? that was pretty much it, right? So that's a big number. And then, as Commissioner Unruh just mentioned, there's a lot of economic activity that goes around this arena and the things that happen here. So I'm very, very pleased that it's there. I'm glad it's doing a great job. And my only concern, looking at the entire report, really is the O&M reserves. That's the only concern I've got. But I guess I still have new guy syndrome. So let me ask you for clarity: what if the audit get through the audit? What is the likely amount of money that the check will be for? I mean, it's probably in the report somewhere, but where was that presented somewhere in here?
It's not in the report. In my recollection, I've looked at those numbers. I think we're looking at probably around 200 and no, I think we're looking around, I don't have the number with me, sorry. 300, there it is, around $375,000.
All right. That's the number we'll look forward to, hopefully. Good to hear that. And just for my own understanding, is this a check that would potentially happen on a quarterly basis or a yearly basis?
It's annual.
An annual. So this is the first time then, under the new contract, that we've actually received a positive number.
That's correct.
All right. Well, looking forward to seeing that in April, hopefully. And just want to say thank you again for all you've done. Commissioners, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the receive and file and give kudos not only to the folks at the arena, but also Mr. Brooks.
Second.
All right. I have a motion and a second. See no other comments. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Thank you.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye. Okay. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item F, presentation of the appraiser's annual report of real property value trends in Sedgwick County.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Borchard, County Appraiser. It doesn't look like the slide presentation is going to pull up on the screen, so we'll go through the report is just to cover some of the 2015 market trends, some of the new construction trends, and finally the January 1, 2016 valuation results. I want to quickly review the primary duties of the appraiser's office. First, physically inspect each property within Sedgwick County once every 6 years. We need to discover, list, and value all property that had significant changes. For example, new construction, remodel, or demolition. And update appraisals each year to assure that all properties are valued at fair market value. And our valuation date is January 1 of each year. I'll quickly review the classification and assessment rates that are laid out in the Kansas Constitution for each property type and class. Residential, the valuation approach is market value and the assessment rate is 11.5%. For commercial property, it's market value and 25% assessment rate. For vacant lots, market value and a 12% assessment rate. Not-for-profit classification is market value and a 12% assessment rate. Agricultural land is use value. Assessment rate is 30%. Ag improvements are market value, an assessment rate of 25%. And public utilities that are state assessed are market value and 33%. In Sedgwick County, this graph shows on slide 4 shows the percent of property value by type and class. You can see that residential makes up about 56% of the total assessed value. Commercial about 32%. Commercial machinery and equipment 5%. The state assessed public utility 5%, and all those other categories which we are required to appraise annually make up the rest. On slide 5, we'll show the parcel growth in 2015 for Sedgwick County. The total parcel count on January 1st was 220,113 real property parcels. The trend in sales activity on slide 6, all classes of property rose to 11,771 in 2015. It's a 4% increase over 2014. And slide 7, residential property represents about 56% of the total assessed value. In 2015, new dwelling construction was up over 2014 with 1,148 units. Slide 9, the median sale price for residential property rose to $149,900, roughly a 6% increase. And slide 10 shows that the residential ratio at the end of 2015 was showing a median ratio of 91%. Just a reminder of what the median ratio is when we compared our January 1st 2015 values, which with the sales that occurred after that date through December, the single point estimate, the middle ratio was at 91%. That would indicate a need for a revaluation. And the result of the residential revaluation for January 1, 2016 showed that 53% of the residential properties in Sedgwick County will receive an increase in value. 8% will receive a decrease in value, and 39% will see no change in value. If we move on to commercial property, which represents about 32% of the total assessed value, you can see that commercial property sales in 2015 were 541, little down from 2014, very similar to 2013. Commercial building permit activity increased, 1,298 permits. And slide 15 shows the ratio range for commercial property. With so much variation in different property types, it's better to look at a range. And for commercial property, the 95% confidence interval showed a median ratio somewhere between 83 and 93%. Reviewing the ratios, and as a result of the revaluation of commercial properties, 43% will see no change in value, 30% will see an increase in value, and 27% will see a decrease in value. Slide 17, on to agricultural property. 435,424 acres, or 67% of the land in Sedgwick County, is still devoted to agricultural use. Agricultural property represents less than 1% of the total assessed value in Sedgwick County. Each year, the Department of Revenue provides the valuation per acre for agricultural property across the state of Kansas. So they provide those values per acre based on the use of the land, whether it's cultivated dry or irrigated or grass. The result of the agricultural valuation shows that 64% of the ag properties will see an increase in value, 34% no change in value, and 2% a decrease in value. Slide 19 shows the summary of all those classifications. And just for residential properties, I mentioned 53% will see an increase in value, and the typical change will be 3%. 8% will see a decrease in value, and that will also be a typical change of 3%. On commercial properties, 30% will see an increase in value, and that typical change was 3%. 43% a decrease in value, and that change was down 2%. In agricultural properties, the 64% that increased, the typical change was 9%. And the 2% that decreased, the typical change was 14%. Those were most likely due to use changes. Slide 20, just wanted to cover some key dates in the property tax calendar. January 1st is the appraisal date that we're talking about this revaluation. March 1, we will mail the notice of value to the property owners. And we kind of changed gears in our office to focus on personal property. Personal property renditions are due back to our office March 15th. March 23rd, we'll begin informal hearings with property owners on real property. May 1st, we'll notice personal property owners of their value notices and the 2016 value. May 15th, we'll handle our informal meetings with personal property owners. And at the conclusion of all the meetings and informal hearings, we'll finalize our appraised values for 2016 and certify those values to the county clerk June 15th. July 15th, the clerk will certify the abstract to PVD. August 25th, the governing bodies certify their budgets to the county clerk. And on November 1st, the county clerk certifies the tax roll to the county treasurer. As far as mailing of value notices in 2016, the Sedgwick County Appraiser's Office will mail only value notices that experience a change in the appraised value or classification from 2015. Approximately 128,000 real property value notices will be mailed for 2016, which is about 58% of all properties in Sedgwick County. This alternative method of notification resulted in an estimated savings of $49,400. Property owners who do not receive a notice in the mail can view the appraisal information for their property beginning March 1 online at the county website. Also, after March 1, any property owner may print or view from the website a value notice from the website, which will include instructions on how to file an appeal. As far as the appeals process, if property owners do not think their values reflect fair market value, There's on the back of the notice, there's a form to fill out and return to our office within 30 days of the mailing. And our informal, we'll schedule a meeting with the property owner, give them a date and time, mail them a notification, and we'll begin those hearings March 23rd. Anybody who has questions or wants to do research is certainly welcome to come to our office at 4035 East Harry. We can provide information there. Give us a call, or there's lots of information on the website as well for researching your value or appeal. So that concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Mr. Borchard, you did a great job putting together this information, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
You take some commissioners' questions and comments. Commissioner Unruh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, thanks for the report. Just clarification, someone doesn't get a notice of value and they can call you and you'll send them one, or is the only way to get it to print it off a computer?
Certainly, if they call us, we'll be happy to email it to them or mail it to them, whatever's most convenient for them.
Well, I'm sure there's at least some folks my generation that don't print many things off the computer.
Certainly.
Okay. Secondly, Mike, what the appraisal sales ratio study for commercial, you said it's 83 to 93. Is there a guideline that you have to be within in order to be in compliance with the property valuation director?
The standard for Kansas is they want our median ratios to be between 90% and 110% of fair market value for both commercial and residential.
So does that range from 83, does that imply that we are slightly out of compliance or not?
No, the confidence interval considers the full range, so as long as the high end of the confidence interval is in that range, then it's in compliance.
Okay, thank you. And one other question. You said in your report that our number of parcels went down.
Oh, I did?
Slightly. Is that just because people bought larger properties and just combined the legal descriptions?
I think the parcel count increased. If I said it decreased, that was which slide?
Right. It did increase but it went down from 14 to 15. And I just provoked a question in my mind.
Okay. That was an effort between our office, the clerk's office, and GIS to clean up some parcels that were in the right-of-ways that needed to be inactivated.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's always going up. It went down and it went back up. I thought, well, I wonder what causes that. So you answered my question. Thank you. So,
thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Peterson?
Yes. And this is unfair to the public because they can't see the slides that we up here in the commission can, and you've got obviously the slides, Mike. Hopefully we can get these slides up for the public presentation, because it's a lot easier to understand and it's very difficult without having this. On slide 5, Mike, I assume that this parcel growth number for Sedgwick County, the 2016 number, is as of January 1st this year. Is that why we've got a 2016 number?
Correct.
On that chart?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to get that on the record because I thought that would be the case. Let me jump to a kind of a paradox here on your slides 13 and 14, which is commercial. I'll say this for the public. The commercial property has both the sales, which show about a decrease of about 7.5% roughly by my calculations from 15 over 14 on the sales side, but the building permit activity actually shows an almost little less than 6% increase in 15 over 14. And in light of the fact that we basically had commercial valuation results were about as close to even as they could be, with about 30% having an increase in value, a little less than 30% having a decrease in value, over 40% being unchanged. I'm just trying to understand those numbers a little bit better, because we're talking about, even though it's the second largest category of assessed valuation in the county.
Well, generally what we do when we're developing our models and reviewing our values is we look at more than just 1 year of sales. We're going to drop off the oldest year of sales, add on the newest years of sales, and modify our models based on the new information. There's really no correlation with the number of sales and building permit activity. Certainly 2015 was much more active, or significantly more active than prior years has been. The percentage of change on commercial valuation results is for existing property, doesn't include any new construction.
Okay, well then let me try and go back. Your slide 4, where you give the percent of property value by type and class, you're showing the breakdown of commercial real estates at just a shade under 32%. I was curious if that's about the same number as last year, or has that changed at all compared to what we had when you did this presentation last year at this time?
We really won't know these numbers until we get to the June certification. This slide 4 is the 2015 assessed value, and we won't have all the rest of the valuation complete until we certify in June.
Okay, well I understand you're going to have appeals and the percentage might vary, but I was thinking if you're looking at these numbers this year versus looking at the same comparable numbers from 2015, if there was a change here, because showing the increased median sales price on residential, I was thinking that perhaps the percentage of residential property was growing and growing faster than the change in commercial, and that number, the commercial value, might actually be going down as compared to when we did this presentation at this time last year. If you can't kind of walk me through where those numbers are, let me give you a chance to respond if you've got any additional information that you can give us here, and before I go on to my next question. It looks to me like we're likely having these numbers are residential real estate assessed value in Sedgwick County is growing a bit faster than commercial real estate based on these preliminary numbers.
It's hard to say, just because the magnitude of the commercial new construction could impact that. Keep in mind that machinery and equipment is going to continue to erode as properties get sold. It becomes exempt. So I think the trend's most likely going to be that all real property will increase slightly.
Well, I was going to say the commercial industrial machinery equipment, that's continuing to erode. I don't really know. I could ask you the next question. How's that standing compared to the numbers you presented this time last year? Because I assumed it would be fractionally less. I think it was a year ago.
We haven't started that review yet. Renditions aren't due back until March 15th.
Okay, well, let me jump on, because you mentioned, obviously, the largest single taxable category of land in Sedgwick County is ag, but it's less than 1% of the total assessed valuation here in the county. My understanding is the ag sector took a bit of a hit, and even though these are a tiny percentage of the overall valuation, it's based on, I think, an 8-year rolling average, and the years coming on and coming off. Obviously, the fact that you've got over 60% increase in ag valuation, is that driven more by the formula, or can you give us any additional insight on the ag valuation side of the equation?
Well, it's certainly due to the formula. Like you said, it's an 8-year average, and I think currently the ag market is somewhat flatter in decline. So obviously a good year came on that was 8 years ago. So, and it's based on a income formula that uses the landlord's share of the net operating income divided by the cap rate that the property valuation division sets each year, and then the analysis that PVD does to determine those values.
Does PVD change the cap rate recently?
No, it's hit the floor.
Hit the floor,
Yeah.
and it stayed there?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I view this as an absolutely critical starting point for any of the budgeting operations that Sedgwick County operates with, because property taxes are the biggest source of county revenue, and excluding the state assessed portion, which is kind of, it's mentioned, but it's not really part of this report. It is about 5% of the tax base here in Sedgwick County. This is a critical starting point in terms of where we are from a revenue side for going into our budgetary work for completing our next year's budget. So this is important data, and I view this report very in great detail, because if the economy is struggling, and I continue to think that in some ways it is, the residential information here is very positive news. I have concerns on the commercial side, and obviously we won't know the state assessed till sometime this summer when they come out. But that is a small category, and also what happens with the commercial, industrial, personal property side. But looking at these percentages, this leads me to believe that we're continuing. This is not like the numbers you've presented prior to 2008. Am I correct in that assumption? Because that's before I joined the commission.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I wish I could say we had good news, really good news here, but this is a report that remains cautionary, just like it has the last few years, in my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a couple of questions as well. On slide 2, you make a comment that appraisals are done each year to ensure that all properties are valued at a fair market value. Is there a range for residential properties? I think you mentioned a range for commercial properties is 90 to 110%. What about residential properties?
It's the same range.
It is the same.
For median ratio.
Was there some discussion in legislature about changing that to plus or minus 5% versus plus or minus 10? You haven't heard that?
No.
Okay. Maybe that's a holdover from my years ago hearing about that. But okay, you talked about you visit each property at least once every 6 years. Is that correct? I understand that?
Yes.
It's also on slide 2. But you're going to make adjustments to looks like a majority of the properties. I mean, if I understand correctly, right now we're at 91%. Is there something in place right now to try to drive that closer to 100%? Are we trying to drive towards 100%, or are we doing anything specifically to?
Well, we're trying not to get below 90. So
right.
So at the end of the year, we were at 91%, which would indicate there is a need for revaluation to get closer to the 1 and farther from the 90.
So you inspect some homes. Obviously, you can't inspect them all. I know you do the best job you can, but are we applying some type of correction to the homes that are not being appraised? Those specific homes are being appraised. Is there some type of a correction applied to other homes to try to drive that up towards a closer to 100%, away from 90%?
We review 100% of all values every year.
Okay. So,
yeah.
So it's required you do it every 6 years, but you do it every year.
We're required to inspect and on-site physical inspection once every 6 years.
Okay.
And then revaluation for all properties every year.
Okay.
If necessary.
Generally speaking, I think the report is very positive. Again, I see this is, most of the slides are very positive. The things are trending in the right direction. So I think overall it's a very positive report. The only thing I think is negative in the entire report is the one slide where it talks about commercial property sales is down. But other than that, everything else is trending in the right direction. I had one other question. I'm looking for my question. Oh, I just want to make a comment on the key dates. You did read that, and I appreciate you reading that. Unfortunately, the audience can't see this, but there are a lot of dates that have to happen starting from January the 1st. It ends up November the 1st. The entire process between the appraiser and the clerk and the treasurer's office doing their respective duties. And one thing we've talked about recently is this issue of the Senate Bill 316 trying to insert an option for an election somewhere in that process. And I just want to say thank you for helping us with that. You are also you're one of the key players in trying to find a way to change your dates in a way that actually creates the option for election. So some of these dates may change if the legislature, in fact, adopts our idea on how to insert the election option into those dates. So I just want to make that comment. Let me understand, if someone does not receive a evaluation notice in the mail,
this is an Amber Alert. We have just received the following information from the Wichita Police Department regarding a possible child abduction. Law enforcement is looking for a light blue 2001 Mercury Grand Marquis with an Arkansas temporary tag and front end damage. The suspect is believed to be David Hatcher, a 5'9", 160-pound black male wearing black jeans and a black hoodie sweatshirt. The victims are Layla and Lily Hatcher. Layla is a 5-year-old black female wearing only underwear. Lily is a 2-year-old black female wearing only a diaper. If you have any information on the location of Layla and Lily, please call 911 immediately. They were last seen in Wichita, Kansas at the Days Inn, 7321 East Kellogg, Wichita, Kansas. We repeat, the suspect vehicle is a light blue Mercury Grand Marquis with Arkansas temporary tag and front-end damage. Please call 911 immediately if the vehicle or either child is seen. Other tips may be shared with the Wichita Police Department at 316-383-4661.
Correct. So what's the easiest way to get a hold of your office? The 660-9110 phone number is the best place to start. All that information is also available to review online. So online, if you want to do your own research online, all that stuff, all that information is available. And if they have questions, give us a call at 660-9110. Thank you.
all right. See no other comments or questions from the commissioners. What's the will of the body?
I move we receive and file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. See no other comments. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Borchard. Good job today. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item G, Memorandum of Agreement.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, David Spears, Director of Public Works. This morning I'd like to make a brief presentation to you about a memorandum of agreement that has recently been established between Sedgwick County Public Works and the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism. Many construction and maintenance activities performed by Public Works crews and contractors require various environmental permits before they can be undertaken. The Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism is one such agency that must review and approve many projects that might have the potential to impact threatened and endangered species. Shortly after coming onto the Board of County Commissioners, Commissioner Ranzau expressed an interest in finding ways to reduce the regulatory burden on public works projects. We worked with him to identify issues with threatened and endangered species, and over time, he and Chairman Howell were able to fully engage the state in a conversation about application of the regulations. Based on the groundwork that the commissioners laid, our staff was able to work out this memorandum of agreement with Wildlife and Parks. The agreement recognizes a number of best management practices that we developed over time to address concerns with threatened and endangered species. It greatly streamlines the approval process and in many cases eliminates the need for project review and approval if our established best management practices can be followed. I'd like to note that this agreement is unique. No other local unit of government in Kansas has such an agreement in place. Both parties agree that this agreement will result in avoidance, minimization, and restoration of potential impacts to wildlife resources. I'd like to recognize the efforts of Robin Jennison, Secretary of the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism, who got personally involved in this issue and helped to bring the agreement to a conclusion. I'd also like to recognize Justin Wagner of our legal department and Daniel Schrant, who is our staff engineer who worked through the minute details of this arrangement. Daniel or I would be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Commissioner Ranzau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave, I just want to thank you and Daniel and everyone else for all the work on this. We've been addressing these issues for years now, and I think we'll continue to do so in future years to try and decrease the regulatory burden on you, which helps the taxpayer, and we've also passed some legislation in the past which helps the private sector as well. So I think it is important to do what we can to be more cost effective and more efficient, and I appreciate that. I know in the past we've been criticized by some in the media who lacked understanding and concern of the situation, but the taxpayers of this community can rest assured that we are doing everything we can to reduce the regulatory burden upon them as well as ourselves in dealing with some of these issues. And we still have some more issues that we can address as we move forward, but this is a big win for us and big win for our community, and I appreciate all the work you've done, and hopefully it'll make your job a little easier.
I think so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Peterjohn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the work of the Public Works staff as well as Commissioners Howell and Ranzau and their leadership on this issue. I know that anything we can do to put us in a better position in this challenging area, I think is a real plus for us going forward, and having a strong relationship with our counterparts in Topeka with the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks and Tourism. Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism is a strong positive for Sedgwick County. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Spears, I'm just curious. Does this have any sunset? This agreement has any sunset built into it anywhere? This is going to be permanent, as far as we know.
This agreement can be terminated by either party, the Department of Wildlife and Parks or ourselves at any time.
Very good.
Until then, I'll just keep on going as is.
And for the record, you want to please state your name and
my name is Daniel Schrant, and I was the stormwater engineer that worked on this project.
Okay, thank you so much. Going on, just a little bit, one more question. This is only going to help Sedgwick County only, is that correct? This is not going to help anybody else in the state of Kansas. This is just
yes, this is an agreement between the county and Wildlife and Parks only.
Yeah, I guess with that in mind, I guess the legislation we've talked about in the past, I guess I still have an interest in that. I just wanted to state that for the record. I'm not really completely satisfied. I think that I would really prefer that the state would change direction on this entirely. And this is a nice that we have an agreement. It certainly does help out, and I appreciate that very, very much. And thank you for your good work to present that this morning. I guess for myself, I think it's nice to have an agreement for a little while, and it certainly will help us out, but I guess I have concerns that this is going to last and that this isn't going to help other counties. So I guess I want to just make those comments. Commissioner Unruh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, if we're the unique in this, having this agreement, but it's as rational and reasonable, and it clearly shows progress can be made in this area, wouldn't other counties also find this out and want to do it so they could lessen the burden on their public works department?
I would think so. I think one of the big things I've learned through this is that with Daniel and their department, there's trust involved between them and us. They know that what we tell them we're going to do, we do it. They have seen pictures of what we do. They have come down and looked at what we do on these projects, and they believe that we will do what we say we're going to do. And I think that's a big key to it. And so, yes, I would think other counties could do this also.
But they would have to negotiate their own memorandum of agreement. I mean, this.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. And this agreement is just for our information. This agreement's already a done.
It's a done deal. See, it's actually between their department and Public Works, not between the county. So I signed it, and that's when we worked through our legal department, and that's the way this was done.
Very good. Well, good job. Thank you.
Just make sure I'm clear. I am very, very grateful. I am thankful so much to the state for entering into this agreement with us. I really do appreciate it, and I'm glad we have this accomplishment. It's a huge, huge accomplishment, and it took years to get to this point. I want to say thank you to the Secretary Jennison and to you and you, Mr. Spears, for staying with this and working with this and just really bringing us some solution to this. I really do appreciate it. So I don't want to sound ungrateful. I am very thankful, and I think this is a huge step in the right direction. I guess my concern is that we have, an agreement that could be stopped, and I'm not sure I like the fact that this can go away quickly, and I'm concerned about other counties as well. So just having said that, I want to make sure I sound appreciative of what has been done. So, okay. Commissioner Peter John?
Well, I just wanted to expand on my thanks not only to Public Works but also to the legal department for their role in this too. Thank you.
Commissioner Ranzau.
Yeah, just Daniel or Dave, there were a couple people that we worked with in the wildlife and parks that are new. Do you offhand remember their names? I'm sorry, I should have got that before, but
Yes, the people involved with this project outside of Sedgwick County would have been Darren Riedel. He's our current regulator that we're working with. And prior to him, we were working with Brian Bartels, who has since moved on from Wildlife and Parks. There was another individual, I can't remember his name, but then, of course, Robin Jennison was involved.
Right. A couple of there's been a little bit of turnover. A couple of the new people that are in the department were eager to help us, and were very easy to work with, and we appreciate their efforts and their willingness to help facilitate this. I also want to appreciate you. I know to say that I appreciate all the work you've done. You've done a lot of work on this. You went with me to Topeka once to testify on the spotted skunk, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. And the final individual is Chris Behrens. He was an ecologist.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to recognize him and say that we appreciate that. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we receive and file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Just a final comment. Please do share our appreciation with those that helped, and especially the Secretary. I know we do appreciate that so much. Madam Clerk, we have no other comments, so please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Peter John?
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye. Thank you. Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Consent agenda?
Chairman, Mike Scholes, County Manager. I recommend you approve consent agenda items hotel through Quebec.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda with the exception of item N.
Okay. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda except for item N.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that?
Yes. Can I have a discussion?
Yes, go right ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering on item M, we're having some restructure and restaffing in the manager's department, which my backup material changed, we got an update, I guess is the right word, late last evening, and one of the changes looks like a senior corrections worker position. Is that, Mr. Manager, is that going to be eliminated?
Yeah, it's going to be reclassified to this courthouse police position.
Okay, it's relevant to the restructure in your office.
Just for clarity, are you talking about item M, Mary, or N?
M is in Mary.
Okay, I misunderstood that actually.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I thought you were talking about November.
Yes.
Okay, the senior corrections officer position.
Yeah,
it's been vacant since
it's been vacant.
March 2013.
Okay, all right.
And so, as a cost-saving move, instead of asking for a new FTE, I'm using one existing and pulling it into.
Okay, understand. Thank you.
Commissioner Ranzau.
And just to clarify, you excluded item N as in November.
N as in November, Nancy, never.
Okay.
Oh, is it N or M?
N
I
is in
heard it.
November, Nancy never.
Okay.
But you asked about M.
I did. because
Okay,
the
that's the
motion
confusion.
now doesn't include N.
Yes.
I'm asking about M.
Okay.
Okay. I can answer both.
So the motion is to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item N,
N as in
November.
Nancy, or-
November.
or M
We're
as in
going to-
Mary?
We're not going to do item N November right now. But everything else is what we're considering. Okay. Is that correct?
Wow.
All right, thank you. We're clear. No other comments on the consent agenda excluding item N November. So with that, I have a motion and a second. See no other discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh,
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn,
Aye.
Commissioner Ransall,
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. Okay, we're now on item N November. Is that acceptable? Okay, so let's go ahead and get into that a little bit. Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions on item N? Commissioner Unruh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps my memory is weak, but I don't remember that we've had a discussion about this item. And so I have got several questions about it. This is about adding a staff position to manage a gun locker in the county entryway. Am I wrong, or have we haven't discussed this in staff?
We have not discussed it in staff. I think the manager has been, this is an item the manager, I guess, has developed, and he thought it would be non-controversial, put it on the consent. So.
Well, I just, for an item on the consent agenda, and I didn't know the backup for this, I haven't seen a picture or a drawing of where it's going to be. It's a change in the staffing table. I wonder I guess my first question would be, was this generated from staff recommendation, or was this generated from commission request, or how did this get started, I guess?
I think I might be responsible for that, because I received some requests from attorneys who are concealed carry folks, and they're not allowed to carry in the building, of course, under state law. But they're concerned about what happens between the courthouse and their offices or their homes, because they can't very well leave their office if they walk or whatever, or even if they drive. They're without their firearm, and so they'd like to check that firearm at the entrance to the courthouse. And so I don't know what all has happened since we initiated that discussion, but I think that this is a letter that came in to me from council requesting that we have some kind of gun locker or something like that.
Okay. Well, in my 12 years here, I think I've only had one person ask about that. And so I was wondering what's the genesis of this? If we have a lot of people that think this is, they're concerned about their safety and they want to be able to carry right up to the courthouse door. If we've got a lot of people who are requesting that, well, then that's one explanation. For me personally, as a commissioner 12 years, I've only had one person, and she was concerned about getting her weapon out of her trunk when she went back to the parking garage, seemed to be. So I was surprised to find this on here, and since it amounts to an investment in personnel or changing, because the backup material I have now is not what I saw yesterday at noon, and that has to do, I guess, that we have a property and lease contract specialist. Is that an open position also?
Yes, it is.
And that's been open quite a while?
That's been open since July 2015.
Okay, so just 6 months ago, but we're not planning on refilling that, evidently.
No.
Okay. Okay, well, those answers most of my questions of how we were moving this around, but where is this going to be?
This is going to be in the front lobby, up in the corner of the front lobby.
Okay. Okay. Is there a drawing? I wouldn't mind seeing where it's going to be and how it's going to be staffed, and You know, I used to be, just as kind of historical anecdote, I didn't used to like to have the shoe shine stand in our lobby. I didn't think it was necessary, and I didn't want it in our lobby. Well, maybe this is a little different category, but just to give you a flavor of where I'm coming from, I'd like to know, where's it going to be? Is it going to get in the way of people? I mean, I don't know where it's going to be. Where's it going to be?
It's a great question, Commissioner Unruh. We'll let the discussion continue a little bit longer here, if it's okay. Commissioner Ranzau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to suggest, in light of the commissioner's concerns, perhaps we should table this and allow some discussion and further explanation, and then we can bring it up at another date.
You know what? I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
I'll make that a motion.
I'll second his motion.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Peterjohn?
Well, I'm having my examination of this. We weren't talking about the details of, we were talking strictly of changing the staffing table and personnel, and I didn't know that we were getting into a broader discussion, and if my reading of this was, I thought we were just talking about personnel. Mr. Manager, am I correct on that point?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, thank you, because I don't have a problem in terms of having a wider discussion, and I think that would be helpful, but and I'll support going along, since I don't want to have that, but I want the public to know, since they can't see our agenda, that basically this item was strictly a personnel item and not a broader discussion about what exactly we're going to have in place in the lobby. So, I mean, this is obviously putting some personnel provisions in place on it, but it's structured in such a way that actually it has a cost reduction tied to it, not an increase. Thank you.
Another comment or question from Commissioner Unruh.
No, I understand Commissioner Peterjohn's comment. It just, there is language in here about lawfully carrying personal protection firearms and having a locked gun cabinet, and so I just thought this was part of the discussion. That's all I have.
I'll make a couple of comments as well. I do understand the desire to have a place for someone. I can understand people would want to carry to the courthouse and they have a place to put their firearm while they're doing business here in this building. I've been a proponent of Second Amendment everywhere we can reasonably. I think this is a reasonable mitigation. So I support the concept, and I'm not so sure I concur with the issue before us today. I'd like to think about this a little bit, so I think I'll support the motion to table this for a short time. But the concept, I think I'm agreeable to that. I'm not so certain we need to have the solution exactly as it's been presented in this backup material today. So that's my only question. I think it'd give us a chance for us to see a drawing and how this is going to work, and maybe ask some questions. And so I think it'd be reasonable for us to take a little bit of time to wade through this one going forward. I see no other comments or questions. We have a motion to table this, so we'll get it back on the agenda item. We'll request it when we're ready. So to table this, motion and a second. See no other further discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Norton? Oh, sorry. Commissioner Peterjohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye. Okay. Through the consent agenda, the next item, please, Madam Clerk.
Public agenda?
Is there anybody from the public that's wanting to address the commission today? Seeing no one. No one's here to address the commission. All right, we're going to go ahead and move over to the fire district. So I'm going to recess the Board of County Commissioner meeting for February the 17th of 2016, and we're going to call to order the governing body of Fire District Number 1 for the date of February the 17th of 2016. Madam Clerk, first item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner Unruh?
Present.
Commissioner Norton? Commissioner Peterjohn?
Present.
Commissioner Ranzau?
Present.
Chairman Howell?
Present. Okay, next item, please.
Consideration of minutes. Item A, regular fire meeting minutes of December 2nd, 2015. All commissioners were present.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes of the December 2nd fire agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And see no discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh,
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn,
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau,
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. All right, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
New business.
There's none.
I guess there's no business, so I guess we're going to go on to the next item, please.
Consent. Item B, resolution amending the governing body of Fire District 1 in meeting agenda policy.
Mr. Chairman, County Manager, recommend you approve consent agenda item.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Seeing no discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh,
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn,
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau,
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. And that concludes the business for the Fire District Number 1, so I'll adjourn that meeting, and we'll call back to order the regular business meeting, board meeting of the Board of Sedgwick County Commissioners for February the 17th, 2016. And we're ready for the next item, please.
Legislative issues.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Bonanchin, Assistant County Counselor. Have a few items to cover on our legislative issues. One of the items that I wanted to update you up front is there has been a change in some of the deadlines at the state level. The turnaround day has been moved up from Friday, February 26th to February 23rd. The last day to consider bills not in the House of Origin is moved up to March 21st. That's from March 23rd. And drop dead day is now March 25th rather than April 1st. So the legislature has the framework for a budget completed. There's some minor issues to work out in committee, but they seem to be prepared to move forward rather quickly on getting the remaining business done for this session. A couple of issues I was asked to bring up. One had to do with asset forfeiture being the seizing of private property, personal and real, regarding involvement in criminal activity. There are currently two bills in the House, 2638 and 2699. 2638 would take all of the proceeds from the sales of these that currently go to the local and state officials that law enforcement officials that have seized those items. They get the proceeds now that goes into a law enforcement fund for that municipality or the state level. 2638 would sweep that entirely into the state general fund, and there would not be a special designation for it in the state in general fund separate for law enforcement. It would also require that a conviction be obtained in order to have a sale go forward on a particular item. 2699 would actually split those funds between 50% to a special law enforcement trust fund for the local law enforcement, and then 50% to a newly created city and county forfeiture fund on the state level. And then the Attorney General's office would be responsible for administering a voucher system. Cities and counties could apply and receive law enforcement funds based upon rules and regulations set out by the AG's office. Currently, these procedures are civil in nature. It's by a preponderance of the evidence. There's notice to the property owner of the proceedings, opportunity to challenge those judicially, and so there is a due process to the taking of this property. Another topic.
If you don't mind, I think we could just take these one at a time, if
Sure.
that's okay, because I think that's complex enough. I don't want to forget what you just said.
Okay.
That's okay.
We'll
So we'll
do
get back to the second one of that in just a moment, if that's okay. But what you just said a moment ago, make sure I understand. You said that there is due process right now.
Yes.
Despite the fact that there may be no conviction, the property still could be seized. I think I talked with someone yesterday about this. And I think they used the word probable cause, which ties into, I guess, some type of due process conclusion where we can still seize property without a conviction. Is that correct?
The current state law is that you can seize property either by warrant or sufficient probable cause to believe that it was involved in criminal activity. And then the judicial proceeding occurs after that, where the court then looks at the totality of the circumstances and then makes a determination, based upon the standards preponderance of the evidence. It's not the same standard as it would be in the criminal matter. In the criminal matter, obviously the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. Preponderance of the evidence is essentially 50% plus one. It's just a little bit over the line. If the preponderance of the evidence shows that that the item, whether it be personal property or if it's a real property seizure, was involved in criminal activity, then the court could rule under current state law that that property is forfeited and then subsequently sold according to the rules under the statute.
Okay, so there's a philosophical, constitutional argument, I guess. I think I would have to disagree with the current processes and procedures. I really feel that under conviction, seizure, to me, I think is very understandable. But when someone doesn't receive a conviction, I think when you talk about preponderance of evidence and probable cause, to me that someone has not been convicted, but they still may lose their private personal property, whether it be real or personal property. To me, that is not good. That is not good law. And I guess that part of this proposed House Bill 2638 and 2699, I think they both include this provision. Is that correct?
I believe they both include that provision. That provision actually was introduced, I believe, last session too in a different bill, right, where that was brought forth. And so the concept being that there wouldn't be that forfeiture without a conviction, on the underlying offense. It does have, it does include currently, and it would include in the future, for basically innocent individuals. For example, if someone were to loan someone their car, they use it for a drug sale. That would be, if it was something that was completely innocent. In other words, I loan you my car, you go into a drug sale, and then under those circumstances, my car gets seized, even though I didn't know you were going to sell drugs out of my car. There are currently protections in place for those individuals to be able to get their property back, but it does take some time to do so. They have to present that they were innocent in the transaction. Whereas if it was somebody who was actually involved in the transaction, say, here, take my car to go complete the sale, and you knew about it, you knew what was going on. That's again an evidentiary issue, but it does take some time it does take some time for individuals who may be innocent to get their property back.
I don't recall right now if it was House Bill 2578 or House Bill 2052, the Public Building Security Act or the Open Carry Preemption Bill. One of those two bills had a provision in there that said if a gun was seized from someone that was arrested, charged, prosecuted, if they weren't convicted, that gun had to be returned back to the person it was taken from. There's a standard there, and I think it was really based on a principle of ownership. Which I believe is a constitutional principle we ought to be very sensitive to. So there is precedent for this type of language, and I guess I would like to be supportive of these bills on that particular provision. However, I am not supportive of House Bill 2638 because of the revenue shift that goes from local government to the state. I think there's a heightened desire for this because of the tremendous amount of property being seized in western Kansas because of the Colorado marijuana legalization that's happened a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of evidence being seized out west in western Kansas, and I think that the state sees this as an opportunity for them to move some of that revenue to the state level. And so that's, I think, the genesis of this bill. But I disagree with that. But I will say, though, I served on the House government and general government budget for 3 years in Topeka. There was a tremendous awareness and concern that agencies that had punitive ability, that they would simply be incentivized to be harsh on the people they dealt with simply because it incentivized themselves. In other words, the fines that they would assess would benefit the particular agency. So again, I'm not accusing any law enforcement of having this mentality, but there's a potential assumption by some people in the legislature that it would look better, I guess, if the agencies themselves did not personally benefit from the seizure of assets and property. And so I think that the idea that this would go to a governing body above or outside that particular law enforcement agency, I think as a principle, I think I would like to see us support. What I mean by that is and I'll just tell you, I talked to Sheriff Easter yesterday. He spends around $300,000 in training each year, and I have no problem with appropriating that money. I would prefer for all the revenue to go towards the governing body. In our case, it would be the county, and if it was Wichita, it would be the city. If it would be the state highway patrol, it would be the state of Kansas. But the principle is that the revenue should go to the governing body. All revenue should be brought in under the accounting of that governing body, and then those monies appropriated out to things that the agencies need. So in our case, I would be very supportive of the revenue going currently is being just retained by the law enforcement agencies and used. I'd rather see that, I guess, remitted to the governing body for us to receive that and then appropriate funds back for their needs. I think that's a good place for us to be. So, but in terms of neither one of these bills has 100% of that money retained by local government for those assets that are seized by local government. So to me, I can't be supportive of either one of the bills in terms of the way that they shift the revenue to the state. So I'd like to ask my colleagues, I guess, for partial support and partial opposition. The part I would support would be the issue of the principle of convictions should be the standard by which property is seized. I do agree with that in both of these bills, but the revenue side of these bills, the dollars should stay local, whether it be by law enforcement or, in my opinion, more appropriately, the governing body. I think that would be a place for us to drive towards. And by the way, I hate to use bill numbers because, although I do it all the time, these bill numbers will change through the process. We know that. So when I say we support House Bill 2638 partially or whatever, that number might change in the process. So I'd like to just say we would support the concept of convictions for seizure and not support the shifting of this revenue to the state, but have it retained by local government, preferably the governing body, or at least that, if not the actual agency themselves. So I'd ask my colleagues for support of that. Commissioner Peterjohn, do you have some comments on this?
Yes, I want to understand. There's some fairly complicated legal language referring to various and sundry statutes. So, John, if I can ask you, I don't see any sort of a threshold. So if somebody gets arrested and booked into the Sedgwick County Jail, is it possible at that point that their money, they had, say, $40 on them, could be confiscated under the current law or the provisions that are proposed here?
It's possible, and I'm not sure that an amount that low would necessarily raise eyebrows, but say you add some zeros to that number and say you had $40,000 on you, that's an unusual number to be for an individual to be carrying around. It's usually, at least an indication from a law enforcement perspective that you may be involved in some sort of illegal activity, because generally people don't carry $40,000 on them. It's one of those things where the natural view is that, well, that's probably money that used in drug sales.
Well, let me ask you: is there a dollar threshold in either of these two bills of any amount? I mean, is it theoretically possible you could have a confiscation for $1 or have somebody's car taken because they were arrested for some other charge, in theory?
Theoretically, yes. I believe that if you look at it from a law enforcement perspective, because there is a cost in the actual procedure of seizure, you have to look. You would have to look at it from that perspective and say, okay, what exactly is on an individual policy threshold for each individual law enforcement agency? What's the threshold? We're not going to initiate proceedings over $1, but we'll initiate proceedings over something substantially more valuable. Or if that dollar happens to be part of a total seizure that's substantial, then it does make sense over that single dollar. But there isn't an actual threshold.
Wow, because that's very disturbing in the sense that whether it's a car, whether it's some other personal property like the chairman alluded to, or whether it's just carrying around cash. I mean, carrying around cash, I mean, we have legal tender laws saying that you've got to, you know, if I expect to buy something, I'm supposed to use legal tender. So on the one hand, we've got a law that will say to pay, you know, all debts, public or private. I think it says so right on the currency. But if I carry too much of that, that becomes, and I get arrested for something else, that can become, we've got a battle here over splitting up the spoils between the local government and the state. And while I'm obviously sympathetic to protecting the county side, I'm more concerned from a civil liberties point of view in terms of people just being, you get arrested for relatively minor charge, and any money that you have on you can be confiscated, and to get it back, you don't actually have to be convicted of that charge. We can have a case against just the personal property, and in this case probably most frequently cash. And the due process side of it, that sounds fine, but if you've got preponderance of the evidence, I mean, if I lose my car, I've just lost my transportation. I may not be convicted of anything, but my car's been seized. So you know, in terms of being penalized, I guess my record might, the person who having this, they didn't have their record clear, but they were in a position where they're going to lose their property, and where these bills are is troublesome in this environment. So I guess I share the chairman's convictions, but I'd like to go a little bit further, because if we're going to have cases against inanimate objects, and it's considered civil as opposed to criminal, and you don't have criminal protections in place, I think we've gone down we're on a very slippery slope from a legal perspective that is troubling to me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ranzau.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I want to say that with respect to 2638, I'm going to talk about that. Although I also looked at 2399, I think it was. I didn't think it did have the civil forfeiture language in it, but nevertheless, I agree with the chairman that as far as all the money that's being received, I don't think it should all go to the state. I think it should go to the law enforcement, or to the general fund of the political entity where the law enforcement resides. For example, if it's a state agency, it should go to the state general fund. If it's a city or county, it should go to the city or county general fund. But the main issue of the bill is the idea of civil forfeiture. And I agree with my colleagues. You know, the government's charged with protecting life, liberty, and property, and we shouldn't infringe upon that without due process. And while there is a due process, there is a different standard when it comes to life and liberty. We can't put you in jail, and we can't subject you to the death penalty based upon the preponderance on the evidence. It has to be beyond a shadow of reasonable doubt, I think, right? But now evidently we have a different standard when we want to take your property from you when we think you did a crime that we can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And I guess I have a problem with that. I think you should have the same standard. The government says, we think you committed the crime and we're going to take your property. Now, we can't prove that crime, but we're still going to take your property because there's a lower standard. I do have a problem with that. If you think about it, when it comes to putting people in prison and convicting them of crimes beyond a reasonable doubt, there are still people, even with that very high standard, I think it should be a high standard, even with that high standard, there are people who are convicted wrongly. So if that high standard, innocent people can be convicted, think about what could happen with a much lower standard when it comes to your property. And I know this may put us on the opposite side of some law enforcement agencies, but I think we have an obligation to keep a high standard for taking your property. Once again, if the government says we're going to take your your property because you committed a crime, then they should have to prove it. So, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, in the past we've been making some.
Let's do that.
I'll make them, and I want to stay away from bill numbers specifically, although I may have to use it a little bit here. I want to make a motion that we adopt a policy that we support the idea of returning property to people unless they've been convicted of offense as written in House Bill 2638, Section 2, A and B, but oppose taking all the funds that are eventually received and giving them to the state, but rather support the idea it should go to the general fund of the city, county, and state, wherever the law enforcement agency is located. And I would like to authorize the chairman or his designee and our legal office to provide testimony in support of these principles, regardless of what bill it's in the future.
Second.
Good. Thank you for the motion, and I think you worded that very well. We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Peterjohn?
I plan to support this motion, and I appreciate the well-worded motion being made by Commissioner Ranzo.
Good. Seeing no further discussion on this item, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzo?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye. All right, Mr. Von Aitken, please continue. Aitken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the other topics that was brought to my attention is the use of body cameras and the Kansas Open Records Act. And this actually is a little bit broader than just the Kansas Open Records Act. The body cameras are becoming more prevalent in light of events in other places, Ferguson, Missouri, Baltimore, Maryland, New York City, where to protect, in large part, the officers, that body cameras are being implemented and they're on all the time, taping footage, so that if there ever is an incident where there's a question about the officer's conduct, you would see from the camera what the officer's conduct is. The problem with body cameras is that because you have that much footage for each individual officer constantly going, you generate a lot of hours of video. In order to be able to provide information, you have to be able to redact that information in certain circumstances. If you're providing it pre-trial to a defendant, you're going to have to redact personal information regarding the witnesses. If you are, if it's a public request after trial, you have to produce that footage. There are circumstances when you may have multiple law enforcement officers responding to a call, and they all have body cameras, and all of those body cameras are generating footage, and all of that footage is going to end up being requested by someone. So, one, to meet the criminal criteria, regarding providing all the information to the defendant so that they can defend themselves, there has to be a culling of the video to the point where that identifying information is redacted before the point of trial to protect the witnesses. The KORA aspect of it is there are some specific exceptions under KORA under which a video wouldn't be turned over to the general public. I have under 45-221 A1, A5, A10, A29, A30, A47, and A53. Those are the ones that I've identified that would be possible exemptions to use. The other aspect of that is that you have a time frame on the other side, which is the civil side, prior to you deal with those those exemptions prior to a civil suit being filed. But once the civil suit's filed, as I read the law, that information becomes the province of the discovery judge, who will then determine whether or not that information is to be turned over. Right now, the city of Wichita is in the process of implementing body cameras for all of their officers. It's something the sheriff has talked about, and I know he has a long-term plan, and he can speak more clearly to that himself. But that's one of the issues that's out there, and one of the issues that as some of the bills go through, there's a bill that would require all law enforcement to have body cameras. That would include our detention officers in the jail. While that would be incredibly helpful to have, there's going to be some costs associated with redacting those videos. And so there's going to be a financial impact to each municipality and on the state level if that law is implemented, that you're going to have additional staffing to cover just redacting those videos down to where they can be turned over. So that's one of the issues that's out there that would have a financial impact on the county that I believe you need to be aware of.
John, do you know if there's a bill number for this Cora issue?
For this particular Cora issue, I do not have a particular number for any bill that speaks directly to this. There are some other law enforcement issues being dealt with currently in bills with Cora, but not dealing with this specific issue. But I know that the topic has come up. It's been discussed amongst the criminal bar, and I know the DA has some concerns about the amount of manpower to be able to turn these videos over as they're required to do under discovery rules.
Generally speaking, when somebody makes a Cora request, if there's a cost to government to comply with that request, do you know whether or not we are allowed to pass that on to the requester?
If the individual requests copies, and when it comes to videos, we're not obligated to copy videos. If you have actual paper items, you can provide copies, or you can provide them for inspection. The problem, of course, with a video and inspection is you still have to redact the personal information for that person to be able to view the video. So that's one of those things that there is for the viewing portion of it, there's not an allowance for providing that information. In other words, you say you can come to this location at this time and place and you can view the video. If we reproduce it, then the cost associated can be requested that the requester pay those costs. And generally, and I've one of my duties in the counselor's office is to deal with Cora issues. Generally, I've taken the position that, and I think this is acceptable, to say that we will not turn over those copies until such point as the costs are paid. We will present a bill to the requester and say these are the items that but we need to obtain the costs of gathering and copying the information for you before we turn it over, which is reasonable. Okay, so since there's no bill number, I'm not being able to read exactly what the legislature is thinking about, but I hear them talking about it. So, and the fact is, I would expect there will be a bill number pretty quickly, and if it happens, it's one of these things I think is politically popular. It may move forward very quickly. So I guess I'd like to be prepared for that, and just talk about this and where's our county and what's our county philosophy in regarding some of the discussion. So for me, I guess I see two ends of this spectrum. There's one end of the spectrum says we don't want to do this at all. We'd like to not provide opportunities for people to see this, and just simply is a law enforcement and the courts, the district attorney, and the victims would have access to this, but not necessarily general public. The other end of the spectrum, of course, is that everything's available to everybody at no cost. And so I see two ends of the spectrum. I think that the reasonable place to go is towards the middle. You identified some reasonable places in Cora that's existing right now where things are not available because it's personal. It's a private nature. For example, if someone takes a video of a locker room, for example, would not be something that would be, or maybe there's a crime being committed that maybe it's got some child pornography on there. I can imagine what might be on these tapes. I have no idea, but there's reasons as to why law enforcement would not want to turn over certain video to someone. And of course, I think Cora has a lot of reasons as to explain, as you have. You've outlined some of these reasons, and I think you did a good job on that. Having said that, I guess my concern is I was given
a number yesterday. The district attorney is actually, I guess, projecting potential $200,000 increase in their costs because of the core request so far. And this is just getting started. I mean, they had 80 cameras last year, and now they've added, I think, another 200. I guess they have 200. No, it says an additional 200, so like 280 if I read this correctly. And potentially the sheriff's going to add to that as well at some point. So this is a changing culture issue. You know, we've got to have to react to this in some way to cover this cost. I would like to see this in this legislation that simply says if this is the general public that wants to access this or get a copy, either case we ought to be able to have a reasonable charge to those folks that make those requests. They should not be borne by the general government, but should be borne by the people making requests. I believe in the principle of it's a personal responsibility issue. I think that when someone makes a request, adds to the burden of government, they ought to cover the cost. So I'm very much in favor of transparency. I'd like to give them as much as we possibly can, under the limits of KORA that are already in place. I'd like to be as transparent as possible, give them as much access to that tape as possible, but I just don't want to bear the cost as a general taxpayer burden. I'd rather let them pay the cost. So those are my positions. Love to hear from the commissioners as well. Commissioner Peterjohn?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, in terms of this, some people may view this as a new issue, but the sheriff's had dash cam videos in his cars for quite a while. We've got security cameras in the jail. There's security cameras used elsewhere in the county. Aren't all of those items pretty much currently? We've got a number of. We're generating video right now to a significant degree in certain areas. So would the proposals before us change? It's just it would be an expansion of our current situation. It's not really a new situation.
Well, it would be. I view it as a significant expansion because now you're talking about, in a dash cam, you're limited to whatever happens in front of the vehicle. In detention facilities, you're limited to what the range of the camera is. When you're talking about body cameras, you're talking about constant video being generated, in some instances from multiple law enforcement officers, all of which you have to review and determine if there's anything that's protected regarding having to turn it over under a KORA request. Now, obviously, there is a specific exception for a criminal investigation, but sometimes that's not always communicated to the people that have to review those things. That hey, this is really part of an ongoing investigation, and we need to use that exemption under KORA. It's just going to be the amount of video generated. We're talking, thousands of hours a week, as opposed to, you're talking about maybe 100 hours a week with the dash cams. You're talking about various spots in detention facilities that are stationary cameras, or they may be able to move a little bit. When you're talking the amount of manpower. And both, for Sheriff's Department and for Wichita PD, every one of those individuals is a point of where a camera is going to be attached to them. So it's the sheer volume is, I think, what the district attorney was speaking to, and I've heard him speak in other forums where he's concerned about just the amount that's being generated. I think we're all appreciative of the fact that this movement is happening to protect law enforcement officers from false claims, but at the same time, it is going to generate an awful lot of video that has to be viewed and redacted in order to be able to turn it over.
Let me ask you in terms of, because you're absolutely right. I mean, we're talking a huge increase in volume. If I just I'm going to pick a ballpark figure, we've got over 500 law enforcement officers in the county. In terms of both detention and commissioned, and I'm just going to say, let me just take the commission side. If I take 150 commissioned officers who are out and they're using their camera times 40 hours a week, that's 6,000 hours of tape per week for that, just that portion of the sheriff's office, let alone everything else that could be also included and on that. So we are talking about a huge increase. My thought would be, in terms of if the legislature is looking at changing the rules in terms of how long tape has to be retained, and you've got a data storage issue, because video is very data intensive in terms of the volume that you need to be able to retain it. And that could be an additional cost in terms of, besides just the personnel, in terms of reviewing and getting into redacting or saving or putting it forward. And then, of course, the question that I don't know if the state's talking about it is retention. How long do you need to keep the data, and in what type of format? And if there's any details available, or if we're just kind of exploring unknown territory here, I think it's important as part of this public discussion. And I agree with the chairman in terms of trying to be transparent, but I really don't want the general taxpayers to have to bear a specific cost if people are seeking specific information under a Cora request.
And Commissioner Peterson, I'll just tell you, I did a ride-along with the Sheriff's Department a few months back, and they did have a dash cam in the car, but if I remember correctly, they could turn it on manually, which they generally don't do. It's usually triggered when they turn on their lights or siren. It turns it on automatically, and it records this. As long as lights and siren are on, and even I think when they turn off lights and siren, it maybe continues on for some period of time. I don't know exactly how it works, but for the most part, unless they're pulling somebody over or running lights and siren, the camera's not actually taking any video. Whereas these body cameras, I think, they're taking a lot more video. I'm not sure exactly what the standards of Wichita Police Department is when they take video yet, but the report I've got, it says about an average of 2 to 4 hours of video in a 10-hour shift. So, and they have a lot more police officers than we do sheriff's officers, and so it is a tremendous amount of video. Management of that video is certainly a big topic. I'm very much in favor of the principle of having body cams. I think having that as a second point of view, it's going to hopefully solve a lot of questions in regards to what actually happened during the stop. I think it's imperative we go in that direction as a state and as a government. I'm certainly supportive of the idea. I just think that, as I've already said, my position on this particular issue is I want it to be clear that we would like to see language that would, again, under the restrictions of Cora, let that apply to this. But secondly, that if we have costs in terms of preparing the video for viewing, certainly in making copies if that was to happen, but just even preparing the video for viewing, if there's costs that we have to incur for the general public, they're not necessarily people who are the prosecutors or the defendants, but just people, the general public, making requests for Cora, under Cora for these videos or to view these videos. I'd like to be able to have something in place that would allow us to transmit that cost back to the requester. That's really the position I think we ought to take here. So that's what I'm asking you all. That's what I'm asking commissioners to consider today, whether you'd be willing to agree with me on that or not. Commissioner Unruh?
Thank you. Well, on this particular issue, I really would like to have some input from our sheriff, what he thinks. I'd like to know what costs we might be exposed to before we'd support something like this. It's not just the costs of getting this information ready for a requester, but it's just keeping it and having someone take care of it, having people check it in and keep it every day and making. I also think that the legislature should consider what sort of financial impact this might have on counties that do not have the resources Sedgwick County does, where it might be a significant expense to that county. So I am not ready to give support. I mean, I agree with comments that have been made, but I'm not ready to support one way or another until I have a little more information.
Well, Commissioner Unruh, let me just be clear. I'm not really said I oppose or support a bill that would mandate to local governments that they have to implement these cameras. That's not my position today. My position is if there is going to be video taken as a local decision, that how this is accessed by the public. My concern is that we're increasing a new cost to our government that we've never really dealt with. I just like to have that addressed by the legislature. So my concern today really is that single aspect, and whether or not we'd like to make a position on a potential mandate from the legislature to implement body cameras. That's another topic. We can certainly go there if that's what you want to do.
Well, they need to consider the things that we've discussed in today's meeting before they craft a bill.
Very good.
That's all I have.
Commissioner Ranzau?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm supportive of what the chairman has said. Basically, Are you anticipating something? Do we need to take, are you asking for us to take a position or give you some guidance like we have in the past?
Well, here's the issue was raised, and so I raised it with you. Obviously, there's a concern with cost. I mean, there is a bill currently out there that does not address the core issues. It just simply addresses the issues of mandating that body cameras be on every law enforcement officer in the state. And so you're talking from troopers on down to correctional officers. That in and of itself is going to generate, if passed, not only are you going to have to deal with the issue of purchasing body cameras, but all of the additional costs that I don't think that bill is taking into consideration. So I guess the guidance that I would ask is that if there is something if there is some movement on that particular thought, in other words, the mandating the implementation of body cameras, or if we can communicate while some of these other law enforcement related core issues are being discussed, that in addition to that, for those agencies that have implemented the body cameras, that there be a specific way to deal with them under CORA that we don't currently do. For the most part, the cost part of CORA is kind of a catch-all. It's like, okay, well, if you have to do this, and there's not a whole lot of guidance to it. I just don't. It doesn't take into consideration the amount of money it's going to cost the individual county or city to produce the information when you're going to have to go through these individual body camera footage. So what I would ask is that you consider providing me some guidance, look for an opportunity to be able to address that issue through the chairman or his designee, be able to provide testimony or bill amendment along those lines. If looking for an opportunity to present, obviously things are moving very fast right now. They're trying to get through next Tuesday so they can recess for a week. But in that process, I think we can communicate that to the lobbyists, that if that issue is going to be dealt with, that we have a strong opinion on what should be done, and that we can provide either something in the form of bill amendment or testimony.
Thank you. Commissioner Peter John?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make a comment. I also agree with the sentiments expressed earlier that, not only having input from the sheriff, but I'd also include the district attorney, and if there's anyone else in this building who would be in a position to be involved, I'd like to get their input too. Thank you.
And with respect to the bill that you mentioned a minute ago would mandate body cameras, I guess I'm going to guess that Commissioner Unruh and I would agree on this one, that I really think this ought to be a local decision. It's a great idea, but I think that the local governments ought to figure out the cost of that and make those decisions when it's appropriate. And so I think we're kind of moving in that direction as a body. I don't think we need the state to necessarily dictate our timeline and mandate to us what we'll do here. So again, I'm universally on the side of transparency everywhere I possibly can, so I'm certainly supportive of us going towards body cameras, but I think that's our decision to make. So I would like to probably be opposed to the bill as mandate, and then also speak to this issue of if they do go down that road, with the issue of how does the government how does the public access that in terms of having core restrictions on the video, and being able to assess some cost to transmit the cost of that to the requesters. Those are, I guess, my 3 points. So I ask my colleagues to consider that.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so go ahead, Commissioner Rainsaw.
I guess I can make a motion like we have before again.
For that,
I trying to put everything together. What I think I've heard is, I guess I'll make a motion that we take the position that, number one, we oppose a state mandate of body cameras. Number two, that we do support subjecting video cameras or video from body cams or car cams subject to QORA, but subject to reasonable restrictions and reasonable fees, and allow the chairman or his designee in our legal department to provide testimony whenever necessary as bills come up that deal with these issues.
I would second that. And just to summarize, if I understand the motion, it's to oppose the mandate, to allow reasonable restrictions under QORA that are already outlined in QORA, and then be able to transmit that cost to the requesters.
The reasonable restrictions, and I said reasonable fee as well.
Very good. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So we have a motion, and I seconded that motion. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye. That's really the only legislative issues I think we have today, unless there's anything else from you.
If any commissioners have any additional questions, I know there's a Senate Bill 421, which is of interest, the security bypass that would allow the county to set a standard by which individuals could be pre-vetted and be able to bypass the adequate security measures. That's being heard this morning. County Clerk Kelly Arnold is testifying. The election audit bill that we provided testimony in favor of was heard Monday, and it's scheduled for possible action today.
Just curiously, we did talk about Senate Bill 421 in one of our staff meetings a while back, and I said I was in favor of providing supportive testimony, but I don't think we had 3 commissioners that agreed on that at the time. So I guess this is an opportunity. I see that one of our elected from Sedgwick County, Kelly Arnold, will be testifying on that bill. I was wondering if we have an opportunity here to, I guess, to make that not just Kelly Arnold, but maybe make that Sedgwick County. This is something that Wichita has asked for, the city of Wichita, and I would like to show support to Wichita. This is not a mandate to us. It just gives us opportunities to allow certain things. It's called freedom, more home rule, more opportunities, more choices. We're asking for options, and so I would like to show some support to Wichita and allowing Kelly Arnold to actually testify in favor of this bill as a Sedgwick County position.
No objection.
Do we need a motion?
I would like a motion if it's okay. It'd be great. Thank you. Chairman,
And
Commissioner Ranzau. Basically, it's Senate Bill 421. It's the fast pass.
Security bypass. I'll just say I'll make a motion that we take a position to support security bypass in general as outlined in Senate Bill 421 and allow the chairman or his designee and our legal staff to provide testimony regardless of what happens to the bill numbers in the future.
Very good. I would like to second that. Any further discussion? So, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye. I will work with Kelly Arnold to let him know that he can represent the county in his testimony if he would like to do that. So, I'll work with him on that, unless you would like to help me with that.
Mr. Chairman, I know the bill is being heard. It was being heard this morning, so we can provide that. We can provide that information to. I believe Kelly's still up in Topeka, and we can provide that information to him as well as our lobbyists that we would concur in his testimony.
Yeah, I actually printed this out, but you wrote this yesterday, so it says tomorrow, and I was thinking it was tomorrow. Nevertheless, I apologize. Okay, well, thank you for that. We'll try to get that information out however we possibly can and let them know we do support the bill. So, thank you. Anything else?
I have nothing further unless the commissioners have any questions about anything else legislative related.
Commissioners, anything else on legislative? Okay, seeing no other comments there. Well, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Other?
All right. Commissioners, anything for other today? Commissioner Peterjohn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to repeat what was said earlier, that with the weather being mild, especially for the next few days, it's a great time to go out to the Sedgwick County Zoo. I'd also be remiss if I didn't point out that February 17th is an important day in American history for several interesting reasons, especially once upon a time this country used to be a world innovator, and I think we've been losing that title, especially in the last few years. And sometimes this innovation occurs under awful circumstances. 1864, the first successful attack by a submarine actually occurred in Charleston Harbor when the Confederate submarine Hunley was successful in sinking the USS Housatonic. Hunley also went down after the attack, and it's a very interesting historical museum set up because of the Hunley. Going a little bit further back, on February 17th, on this date in 1801, the United States House of Representatives broke a tie between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, and basically allowed Jefferson to become elected as the third president of the United States. Interestingly enough, this occurred well after January 20th, which is the date normally presidential terms end now, but back then it actually ended in March. But in terms of one interesting little historical footnote, on this date, the first public gas streetlight in the United States was lit in Baltimore, Maryland, and that's significant in terms of innovation, because as a great country filled with innovations, the United States was first with movie theaters, gas stations, traffic lights, radio stations, shopping malls, and that was right up in Kansas City, motels, something important for us here, air-conditioned office buildings, drive-in movie theaters, and one innovation that some folks may kind of regret, parking meters. So February 17th is an important day in American history. Wanted to get that on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any other comments from commissioners? Seeing none. Mr. Manager, anything else? All right. I think we're done, so we are adjourned. Thank you.
Production and broadcast costs for Sedgwick County Commission meetings have been underwritten by Sedgwick County. KPTS welcomes comments from the public on its broadcast of the County Commission hearings.